a particle, but it is inclusive to both sets of boundaries. So we want to use this principle of simplicity. It's the only way we're ever going to explain the bizarreness of quantum mechanics. Only way we're going to explain how a single reality can act in ways that are opposed to each other, like a wave or a particle. How can you have the same entity doing this? Only way is the principle of simplicity. That light itself, in its so-called superposition, that light itself doesn't have either the boundaries of wave or the boundaries of particle. Now, just take that as an example for a second. And what I want you to see is just simply two things, and we can get to a very, very important point about this unconditioned reality. Namely, that it's absolutely simple. The key thing to remember right now is that the more simple a reality is, right? So it's getting above the waves and the particles. The simpler a reality is, the less intrinsic or extrinsic boundaries or finitude or restrictions it has. The less restrictions or finitude that it has, the more inclusive it is. So as you move up the scale, or the so-called tree of being, you're getting simpler and simpler. Now, this is a concept that actually came out way before physics did. But we use all kinds of concepts in physics which really do use the principle of simplicity all the time. For example, a field. A field, like an electromagnetic field, do you know that a field can actually unify opposite charges? You can actually have positive and negative charges within a field interacting completely, even though they're opposed to each other. Or you can even have the repelling parts of same charged forces interacting with each other in a field. And the only way you're going to ever explain how a field can unify opposite charges or the repelling parts of similarly charged particles is if the field itself through which those oppositely charged particles are interacting, that has to be simpler. It has to literally have less intrinsic and extrinsic boundaries than the protons and the electron manifestations. Just like an electron has to be simpler in itself than its wave-like states or its particle-like states, its wave-like behaviors and its particle-like behaviors. Now, if you can just stick with me for just a minute, I know this is a little complicated, but this notion of simplicity, it's so profound. Because, of course, it literally, we're getting to higher and higher realities. And so the medievals actually said so long ago, I mean, almost in anticipation of quantum theory, almost in anticipation of field theory, the medievals said a long time ago, hey, listen, simplicity is not a bad thing. Complexity is not the only way that you get to sophistication in being. Actually, as you remove intrinsic and extrinsic boundaries from something, that being gets more and more and more sophisticated. And of course, let's just go right up the scale. So, I mean, just look at the diagram there for a moment and you can get a sense of it. You actually get a sense that what you have there is you can have waves and particles. And they can be united in a light, in a light particle like a photon or an electron, right? But basically you can have wave and particle behaviors and manifestations because the electron in itself doesn't have either the boundaries of wave or the boundaries of particle. And furthermore, you can have then electrons and protons acting in a field, an electromagnetic field. And then, as you go up further and further in physics, you can actually have electromagnetic fields acting with gravitational fields, which are the same thing as space-time fields. And you could even have that as a unified field, which links space-time fields with electromagnetic fields. And then you could even have a mind field, as it were. And mind, of course, is a completely different aspect. It's a self-conscious. But the higher and higher up the tree of being you go, the one thing to remember is you're getting simpler and simpler, less intrinsic and extrinsic boundaries. And the simpler you get, the higher the tree up the tree of being you go, the more sophisticated the reality is that you're dealing with. And we will talk about this in the next unit as we continue to work through the metaphysical proof for God's existence.